Namaskar. Hello friends. Today we will discuss a very important concept, namely non-doership. One most important step on the path of spiritual progress is dissolution of ego. One should realize that he is not the doer of any action. He is only an agency with the real string puller being the Almighty. If one can internalize this faith with all the sincerity at one's command, one can start experiencing permanent bliss. Thinking and reflecting along the following lines can help develop this faith. When I feel I am doing something, say moving my hand, can I pinpoint who this I is that seems to me to be the doer? This question does not have any clear answer because our concept of I or myself is very vague and nebulous. If we analyze further the action of moving my hand, we will find that the action involves many pieces of sub-actions, so to say, by many different parts of my body. If we start looking at the action from the last step and keep tracing back, the following scenario emerges. My hand has moved. How did the hand move? Many muscles in the hand contracted and expanded to achieve the hand movement. Why did the muscles contract or expand? My brain sent messages to the respective muscles to either contract or expand. Why did my brain send those messages? My mind decided that the hand needs to move. As you can see from the above scenario, there are many agencies involved in the simple hand movement. Muscles, brain and mind. Mind you, these are only the more gross and apparent agencies. If we really analyze in deep, we will find that actions reach down to millions of individual cells, each of them doing its own minute piece of action in a highly coordinated and controlled manner to achieve the desired outcome, namely moving the hand to a new position. Now each cell is a complete life form in its own right. So, coming back to our original question, who is the doer of this action of moving the hand? Now we can understand why there is no simple answer to this question. A common and very simplified approach to answer this poser is to assign an identity to the physical body that, to our eyes, looks like a convenient single physical unit that can be isolated from other objects. This identity is a name given to the body, which I consider as myself. Similarly, we identify many other bodies. The distinction between myself and others is for no other good reason except that in my consciousness the sensory inputs to the organs of my body are felt while those to the organs of others are not felt in the same manner. So, is this limited consciousness the myself? If so, all such other limited consciousnesses in various other physical objects, living as well as non-living, are fundamentally not different from each other. They seem to have been designed variously for different purposes and functions and are programmed accordingly. Various identities, each bounded by a random physical boundary, that is cell, muscle, motor nerves, brain, mind. They define relative, these are defined relative to a context and are involved in the action. The I that we are conditioned to believe as the doer is a very arbitrary bundling of some objects simply because we are used to identifying physical bodies as mine, yours, his, etc. Moreover, in case of the simplest of the actions, like moving my hand, it may seem adequate to stop at my mind-body organism as the doer of the action of moving my hand. However, if we consider a more complex example, say like my passing an examination, a similar analysis will bring in other clearly defined physical bodies into the analysis as contributors to the final outcome of my passing the examination. For instance, the question paper setter and the examiner would be a few important ones in this case. But we commonly take the credit to ourselves, saying, I passed the examination, and conveniently ignore others' contributions. This is typically a false ego coming into play. Further, it is important to remember that the why behind the pieces of actions by the myriad individual contributors is not even taken into account in the kind of analytical exercise presented above. If we do that, we will be taken onto a completely different level of the action arena and will then realize that there is a bigger picture which we tend not to see because we are rooted in a false sense of self and its doership arising simply out of the conditioning that we keep receiving right since the time we are born in this world of objects until we take our leave from this world. Some people feel that if every one of us starts believing that he is not the doer, everyone will simply not do anything and just sit back saying whoever is the doer will do whatever is to be done. And such an approach to life will be a catastrophe. There is some substance in this argument. In fact, the Creator himself certainly would not want his game to come to a halt. The correct way of looking at non-doership is to assume doership in the present moment insofar as doing something with our body may seem to be warranted as per our conditioned mind. But after the bodily action is taken, we should discard the doership insofar as the outcome of that action is concerned. We should tell ourselves that I was the doer of the physical action, but the outcome of the action is not decided by my action alone. So, to that extent, my doership is not very important. I am not the doer in that fine sense of a responsibility for the result of the action. Otherwise, our normal tendency is to believe that something happened the way it did because I did this and I did not do that. That kind of thinking causes grief when the outcome is not what we expected. In fact, what we consider as an outcome or result of a specific action of ours is not quite so. The action that was taken at a given point in time was a particular scene scripted in the movie called life, and the result is just another scene again. On the deeper level of movie making, the so-called result scene is not an inevitable outcome of the action scene. It is just that the script writer and director chose to project the result scene the way they did. They could as well have chosen the result scene to be quite different. even without changing the action scene. So how can we say that the action was responsible for the result? The action was performed not by a doer, but simply by an actor. The actor in a movie is not responsible for the consequence of an action attributable to him in the movie, unless, of course, we choose to limit our consciousness to the screening of the movie and not the making of it as well. In the same manner, we need to expand our consciousness to go beyond the obvious and explore what is before and after the screening of the movie. The purely body conscious living is akin to the screening of the movie being watched by an audience who forgets for the duration of the movie their real identity and gets completely engrossed in the screen happenings. As regards the exhortation not to take the doership of any action, many people wonder if it means we do not have to bother about whatever we are doing because we are not the doer. So they ask, shouldn't a murderer be excused for wanting to be condoned because he is not the doer of the murder? Now, this is a very distorted interpretation of this exhortation. The exhortation should correctly be interpreted as follows. We are responsible in a worldly sense for the actions taken by us. So, if the world has a law to punish a murderer, the murderer is the doer of the murder in a worldly sense, and as such he has to suffer the consequences. It is important to remember here that the concept of non-doership does not mean exonerating the person taking the action from its consequences. You, before deciding on a particular course of action, must think of the worldly consequences as per your conditioning, experience, knowledge and intelligence, and then suffer or enjoy the actual consequences, whatever they may be. The real meaning of non-doership is as follows. The consequences of our action, more often than not, turn out to be different from what was expected by us when we launched the action. This is because the consequences arise as a result of a totality of various related actions by different players having an influence on the particular situation. In that sense, we should understand that we are not the sole doer of the total action. The doer of the big picture action is hardly ever one single person. So what this means is that I should not consider the so-called outcome or the consequence to be a result of only my own apparent action. There may be other actors, there may be particular situations that cause me to take the particular action that I took, etc. Some people believe that the whole drama of the objectified world is completely pre-programmed and is running like a computer game, and we are only the characters on the game screen who obviously do not control the game. Even if one does not subscribe to this view, it is that bit easier in hindsight, after the action is over, to appreciate that in the context of the particular outcome, I was not the doer in a spiritual sense at least. Of course, as I mentioned before, one is very much the doer in a worldly sense and cannot escape the consequences of his doing on the worldly plane. So it then becomes clear why a murderer cannot be exonerated from his action of murder. Yes, in a spiritual sense, the murderer may ascribe the action on his part to his being a puppet in the hands of the Creator. Or he may feel the specific situation justified his action of murder. For instance, he felt very aggrieved by a very oppressive employer, and that led him into a rage which resulted in his murderous action. So, in a spiritual sense, this particular situation, possibly scripted and engineered by the Creator, also is a doer as far as the murder is concerned. Even the murderer's inherent nature that caused him to go into a rage is also a doer of the murder in a spiritual sense. Again, the murderer was born with the particular nature, or at least the conditioning through the various past experiences may have been responsible for forging his nature into what it became eventually, leading him to take the murderous action. And both these can be attributed to the invisible hand of the Creator, who then becomes a doer in his own way. Another important aspect of the concept of doership is that a typical man wants to claim or disclaim doership of his action depending upon the consequences of the action. Given human nature, it is not uncommon to find that when the consequence is desirable, the person will want to claim doership. But when the consequence is undesirable, he will want to wash his hands off the action by ascribing the doership to many other factors. That is not correct. One has to have a consistent and durable philosophy and not twist it to suit his selfish purposes from time to time. Non-doership and surrendering fruit, is that hypocritical? Am I being hypocritical when I say that I do all my actions but surrender the fruit of them to the Creator? Am I being hypocritical when I say that I am not the doer of my actions but simply an instrument in the hands of the Creator? A person hearing such statements would quite likely suspect that this fellow wants to be very much worldly and to enjoy all that the world offers, but he wants to wash his hands off any negative outcomes of his actions. After all, nobody can see anybody's mind. How can I convince another person that I am not being hypocritical? Generally, as a spiritual person, I need not. But if I need to, in certain specific instances, then I think that is where the role of true vairagya comes. A sincere spiritual person should not only be genuinely disinterested in sense pleasures, but must also be seen to be so. He may still be indulging in all the sense-driven activities, but he should be like an island in them, or like a lotus leaf floating on water and not getting wet or going down under. He should be seen to be free from desires, although he may occasionally appear to be partaking of some sense pleasure. He should never be driving any action for his own sense pleasure, and it should be quite apparent. In other words, his sense-affecting action may be driven by others or a situation not under his control. A simple example would be as follows. You must have come across ladies who themselves do not eat non-vegetarian food, but if their family likes it, they do cook it. Such a lady may even taste it to see if it has turned out alright. But everybody knows that she isn't enjoying the non-vegetarian food herself for her own pleasure. She is only ensuring that she does her duty well. As regards non-doership, a murderer may claim that he committed the murder as directed by the Creator, and hence he is not responsible and as such should not be punished. That would be wrong. The way I can appear authentic when not taking doership on me is as follows. I should say that whatever I am doing is on inspiration from the Creator for His purpose. I do not want anything for myself out of it. But if there are any consequences arising out of this action in the context of the worldly situation, I am prepared to bear them at my bodily level. However, any adverse consequences will not disturb my equanimity because I would know that it is all as per the divine scheme. That is precisely what Bhagavan Shri Krishna advised Arjuna. Do your duty of fighting the war in God consciousness, and in the process, even if you kill your loved ones, so be it. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. I will stop here and see you the next time. Until then, bye. Take care.